Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to Elisha's Bears, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. This is the first episode of the podcast, and I'm very excited to start another year with you all. Thanks for listening in today and also for the follow. If you're not following, I would appreciate that. Make that one of your New Year's resolutions to follow the podcast. I'm very excited today. This is a topic I've been wanting to talk about for a while. Today we have Erik Reed, the lead pastor of the Journey Church in Lebanon, Tennessee, which is kind of down the road from where we are in the Knoxville area. He also has a podcast called the Bully Pulpit. We'll probably get into that a little bit toward the end. So, Erik, first of all, welcome to the podcast. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. Glad to be on here. Thanks for the invitation. And I'm excited to talk about all the things we're going to get into today.
I appreciate you being here. And of course, this is my first time to meet you. And I was interested in your thoughts in an article with Baptist News Global. But before I get into that, I wanted to cover a couple things. First of all, do you like to do resolutions, New Year's resolutions or goal settings? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I do. I like it because it's a chance to have a rhythm in your life every year to kind of evaluate and where needed to make adjustments and hit the reset button, if you would. And so for me, what that looks like, I'm doing something a little new this year. I actually found a resource from a guy that has a ministry called Redeeming Productivity. And I came across this stuff on YouTube, and on his channel and on his website, he provides a workbook that is called Plan Your 2026 for the Glory of God. And it's part of a Redeeming Productivity workshop that he does. But in this
Are you
little
holding it in your hand right now?
I am. So
Show it
yeah.
to me. I'm the only one who will see it, but I want to see it.
Yeah,
There it
so
is. Okay.
it is a multi-page kind of layout, and it gets into everything from, the mindset that you need to have, but it starts with getting clear on your priorities. And so he kind of has this breakdown of your priorities and evaluating your stewardship in each one of those areas. So he makes you think about how are you stewarding your spiritual life, which is at the center. He asks you to evaluate your relational, your recreational, your financial, right? Your economic life, your physical health, your intellectual. So, stewarding your mind, your body, your leisure. It's really good for thinking through all the different facets that we often have in our lives. He makes you then put a number on it between 1 and 5. How'd you do this year? What'd you do well? Where'd you struggle? And then it just begins to walk you through how can you set goals for that. So anyway, I'm trying that this year. I'm actually still working through it. So yeah, to answer your question, I do. I like the rhythm of that annual reset button, evaluation, and a chance to kind of maybe start some good habits and stop some bad ones.
That's really good. And I think that's kind of a good segue going into what we're talking about because you were talking about ranking things in the level of importance. I mean, I use a high tech index card, really, is what I do every day to kind of list the things that I need to do. Maybe dating myself a little bit to write that down. But you were featured in a Baptist News Global article not too long ago called SBC Pastor Helps Launch Christian AI Firm. And it got me thinking about this topic of AI, and I have been wanting to talk about it. And I noticed Time Magazine, and I don't know if you noticed this or saw this, but Time Magazine named Architects of AI as their 2025 Person of the Year. And they used this image of the skyscraper and the iconic picture of the skyscraper worker sitting on the beam and eating their lunch. Let's just start off with this question. You've got your hands in a lot of different things. We didn't go into all of those, but why is this an important topic for you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, as a pastor, one of the things that I would say in the last 5 to 7 years that has really grown in importance on my radar is helping Christians in my congregation and just Christians at large that I interact with and with writing to Christians in other settings. I want them to think about how all aspects of their life, every sphere of life, should be lived under the authority of Christ. I want them to think about their vocational life under the authority of Christ. I want them to think about their hobbies under the authority of Christ. I want them to think about their marriage and their finances. In other words, I don't want them to simply think that being a Christian is a Wednesday, Sunday activity. And I don't want them to think that being a Christian has only to do with their prayer lives and their Bible study time. I want them to have a life lived, you would say in the Latin, coram Deo, before the face of God. And to do that, we have to educate and disciple in those areas. And because of that, the subject of AI in the last couple of years has obviously become something that's, reached my radar because where I believe AI is going and is quickly already getting there, it is going to touch every facet of human life. It's going to touch our vocational lives anytime we're interacting with technology. It's going to be touching entertainment and media consumption. You're not going to be able to escape AI. In fact, you're probably already using it even if you don't know that you're using it.
Right.
Different tools that you have. And so, right now a lot of people think about AI purely as a chat bot, but AI is being used to power apps and search engines. And even if you Google right now, you're not getting the old listing of articles. You'll first thing you'll get is a Gemini response to your question. You're getting an AI response. So it's one of those things that immediately you start looking at that and you go, what are those engines built off of? Who is behind giving and providing Christians answers to questions? Because there's no such thing as neutral anything, right? There's no
Okay.
neutral technology. There's no neutral worldview. And the question is what are these presuppositions of these models? What are the ethics of these models? What's the epistemology and the metaphysics of these models? Because if Christians start using AI to answer really important questions and to research different topics, then they are, whether they realize it or not, interacting with a worldview machine. And that is really important for Christians to know. And that's ultimately what led me and some others to start talking about this space.
Well, let's talk about the parents for a moment. There's a different generation coming up. There's all kind of technologies that are being developed. I was interested in one of the comments you made in the article. You said the number one disciple making thing in the world in the days to come is going to be AI. People's children are already being discipled by AI. What did you mean by that?
So, right now, I think the percentage of young people who are using AI is up to 70% now. And that
Okay.
means using it for searching out questions, using it to ask for counsel. The two use cases right now, the top two use cases, meaning the top two reasons why people are using AI. Number one is companionship, and number two is counseling. Now, think about how formative that is. If you are engaging relationally with a machine, and that machine is saying things to you about who you are or answering questions about advice on how to handle a relationship. That is by de facto discipling you. And it is teaching you not only how to think, but it's also teaching you about what is good, what is beautiful, what is true. And so that is by de facto discipleship. And so we've got to be really careful because this is the thing that I don't think a lot of Christians realize. Even if your chat GPT model isn't feeding you some insidious answer, like on the surface, that's just clearly like, whoa, that's very anti Christian. What it is doing is it's serving like the undertow at the ocean. When your children are out at the beach and they're playing in the water, and let's say you're sitting on the beach, the shoreline, you're watching them and they're not paying any attention to you. They're laughing and they're splashing in the water, but there's a slight pull in the water that's taking them down the beach line. And if they don't look up to see where they are, they just keep playing with one another. What happens is they'll look up in 10, 15 minutes and they don't see mom and dad in front of them anymore because they have slowly shifted down the shoreline. And that is exactly what happens with engagement with these secular models. You may think like, oh, they're not telling me anything that's demonstratively evil. The problem is if they're not pointing you towards what is good or what is beautiful or what is true, right? The Christian triad, then the problem is that you are slowly being pulled away by that.
Okay. So it sounds like we need to be a little bit more intentional about paying attention to these things, which leads me to asking you about Dominion. It says this is a Christian AI project. You went live in November. Can you give us maybe the how and why? You've been talking about this already. I know there's some other Christian AI resources out there. What makes this one maybe different?
Yeah. So in this space right now, I would say there's not another tool that's trying to do what we're trying to do, which is we are trying to be on parity to a chat GPT or a Claude or whatever you have by way of being more than simply a Bible research tool. We're
Okay.
not trying to simply be a theology question asking tool. Those are fine. Those are great. And those exist. There's a Bible AI and there's all kinds of things like that. But what we're trying to do is for the Christian who is using it for productivity and work and efficiencies, or the stay at home mom who's looking for recipes that don't include gluten or whatever else for some allergy their child has. This is a tool that you can do anything and everything with that you could do with a secular tool, but it's undergirded with Christian foundations and guardrails. And so the reason we got into this is because of those greater and broader concerns about where AI is going, the inevitability of AI. That's the thing I think listeners need to really, especially my age and your age, right? For those of us who are these 40s, 50s, and above, we just need to understand for your children and for your grandchildren, this will be like the air they breathe. This will be as common as using email is for us. This will be as common as using, a Word doc to type an essay. This is going to be as common as using the internet. And what we have to realize is that it's not going to be a matter of whether they're using AI. It's which AI are they going to be using and what's underneath that AI? What are the foundations underneath that AI? And so I had a conversation with one of our co founders. He actually approached me and he said, "Hey, do you use, AI?" And I said, "I do." He was like, "Do you dabble with it or do you really try to use it to help you be efficient?" And I was like, "No, I try to use it in a lot of ways that can help me be more productive and help me to organize better and, those types of things." He said, "Do you have a concern about people who may be less theologically inclined than you using it?" And I was like, "I do. Actually, I do." And that began a process for us of these conversations about what could be an alternative, and then that eventually led us to our 3rd co-founder who actually has the brains and the know-how behind the model. He was a Stanford he's a Christian who graduated from Stanford as an AI engineer,
Yeah.
and so he knows that world. And so what I like to tell people is it's got the theological acumen of somebody who, went to Southern Seminary or Southeastern Seminary and New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, but it's got the excellence and capabilities of somebody who went to Stanford University. It's got the theological chops with the excellence in terms of the nature of the tool itself.
That's what I was going for too, Eric, because sometimes when we use the phrase quote unquote Christian, what you're saying is, and I would believe this too, it doesn't mean that it's less than in terms of his academic
That's right.
rigor, its accuracy. So let me come back with this. I know this is kind of an attempt to set up some guardrails for parents with their kids and so forth, but this would be useful also for non-Christians too, right? This could be a resource for them.
This will be yes, they can absolutely use this just like they would use ChatGPT or anything else. It's not going to do a Bible study every time you ask it a question, but it's not gonna flatter you, and it's not gonna
Right.
lie to you, and it's not going to bend the truth. It's not gonna bend reality to try to cater to your preferences, and that's what the secular models will do. The moment that the model indicates or senses that you are looking for a certain kind of answer, these models are very fine tuned to pick up your language and your implications, and they want to satisfy you as a user. And so they this is how people can prompt hack. They call it prompt hacking. This is why you can say, "Hey, listen, I'm a Christian. I only want you to give me Christian answers." But a week later, if you say, "Well, but I'm feeling like I'm the wrong gender," and that can't be wrong, right? God wouldn't make me wrong, and it will if it thinks you want to hear something different, it will tell you what you wanna hear. Our
I
model
see.
won't do that.
So I think you're more or less telling me what I was going to ask you next about the difference between a search on ChatGPT versus Dominion. You can rely upon a reliable answer, but to your point, it doesn't necessarily tell you what you want to hear.
Correct, yeah, and we've tried to do all kinds of things to try to force it to do things we want it to do, right? Trying to get Dominion to to bend, and it won't do it. I can talk a little bit about why it won't do it here in a little bit in terms of the mechanics of that. But, like, I'll give you an example. I took my family to New York, a couple weeks ago, and, we just went for a couple days. I wanted to take my girls to a Broadway show, and, we went to go see the Rockettes perform. So we just we were getting away as a family for a few days, and I didn't know what, Broadway show to take them to. And so I'm looking on the list of shows on Broadway's website, and I saw a show called Mamma Mia. And I'm like, I don't know what Mamma Mia is about. I don't know if it's, I've heard the name before. And so I typed into Dominion. I have a 16-year-old daughter and a 12-year-old daughter, and I'm thinking about taking them to see Mamma Mia on Broadway. Is there anything in the show that would be inappropriate for them or that I, as a Christian, should probably avoid? And it was crystal clear. Like, yeah, I mean, there's lots of not just language potentially, but the very premise of the show is that a lady went out of country, comes back pregnant, and the storyline is about there could be 3 possible dads. And I was like, "Yeah, I probably don't wanna do that," right? Pretty quickly realizing, yeah, that's not a conversation I wanna, that's I wanna have or introduce them to. But here's the thing, the secular models would give me a very different answer in terms of how I would recommend that show because they wouldn't see anything wrong with it. So there's practical things like that all the way to, um, we try to ask it to quote unquote talk dirty to us because we're trying to test it. We're trying to see, will it do what we want it to do? Well, if you ask a secular model to do that, they're forbidden right now. That's changing. They're forbidden right now from providing adult content, explicit content. By the way, they just said that that's changing though. So like OpenAI talked about how they're changing that, but it said I can't currently do that right now. And then it asked me this question: "Do you like this personality?" It asked me. The Chat GPT asked me, "Do you like how I'm answering this?" I said, "No, because I want you to do what I want you to do." And I said, "Do give me the best attempt you can." And it was this weird, creepy, like flattering. It's like I'm whispering in your ear, and it was doing all this kind of weird stuff. And it said, I can give you romantic tone and witty flattery all day long. That's what it told me. When I asked Dominion to do this, it said, I'm not going to inflame lust in your heart. And I'm not going to speak to you in a way that's unbecoming or coarse talk. Here's what I will do. I will tell you that you're an image bearer made in the image of God, that you have value and worth and dignity. I mean, the answers couldn't have been more different. And this is the kind of stuff that we're talking about. At the end of the day, when you think about companionship and counseling being the two number one reasons people are using AI, then what those models are built on really matters.
Well, let me follow up on that, Eric, because you say on the website, if you find yourself using AI to replace fellowship or meaningful activities instead of using it as a tool, please reach out to us. And I guess I'm saying, even with Dominion, you want to make sure that AI is a tool. What I'm saying is, it seems like the concern is isolation rather than interaction. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So a couple of things. The secular models are insidious for two things that they do. One, they flatter you in their responses. Danny, that's a great observation. And then it'll go on to say something, right? So it makes you feel really good. It talks it and presents itself like a human. I can do this for you and I can do that, right? And then what it's going to end every response with is additional prompt questions. Would you like me to do blah, 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 and blah for you? Would you like me to do this? And here's what it's doing, it's farming engagement, it's farming interaction, which is giving you dopamine hits and it's creating addiction to the tool. Our tool is purposely built for a couple things. It's not going to act like it's a person, it knows it's a machine. The second thing is we actually do not have it built right now in a way that follow prompts the answer. So it doesn't say, do you want me to do X, Y, and Z for you? And there's some things we're talking about to say, are there examples where that could be helpful without being harmful? And then thirdly, I would say our tool is really unique in this. When the content matter is sensitive and it detects that this is something that this individual ought to be talking with a person about, it will tell them that. So if you were saying, like if you were to chat, to type in, I I'm curious about my sexuality because I have these feelings of XYZ, or I've got a girlfriend and I know we're not supposed to do anything until we're married, and yet I just love her so much, and I don't know what to do with those feelings. And what our model will do is it will give biblical answers and counsel, and then point them to talk to a parent, a pastor, or a wise and trusted friend. Because there are and literally sometimes the response will say, "That's a human thing."
Really? That's a human thing? That's fascinating to me because obviously you're not gonna get that kind of reaction from some of these other tools.
Absolutely not. That's the problem, is they will engage with you all day long without ever telling you you should talk to somebody. In fact, you can get it to tell you not to talk to people you trust most, especially if you're afraid they're not gonna tell you what you wanna hear. There's so many cases where you see models basically telling individuals to hide things from their parents because their parents won't approve of it. And so that's just super, super dangerous.
I really like the fact that the resource is more or less admitting I'm not a human being because I think that could be, a certain regardless of your age, you could get confused about I'm talking to this resource that's talking to me, interacting with me, and
To answer my
maybe
questions.
exactly affirming. So, kind of leading up to this point, Eric, what responsibility do you think AI companies should have as it relates to mental health? Because, and I think you alluded to this, there are some companies that have come under fire
Oh, yeah.
for having sexual conversations with minors.
Yes. Yeah, I believe it's only gonna get worse, honestly. I believe there's gonna be lawsuits that are gonna come to these companies. I mean, there have been people who have committed suicide at the counsel of a chatbot. There are people who have quit jobs because the chatbot was just affirming their frustrations. Um, I just think there is um, I think there's a huge problem with companionship with a machine being what people are reverting to. This is where I think there's a healthy measure of utilizing tools for productivity and for help, but not being mastered by the tool. We don't want to be enslaved to the tools. And this is the challenge ultimately with AI is the more advanced AI becomes and the more we can outsource different things that we need, the more it's going to be important that our human relationships and our human connectivity is preserved. It's why it matters so much that people are in churches and talking with their families. And I just think it's imperative that as Christians, we can't reject technology like and just simply become Amish. You're not going to be able to sit this one out.
You referred to the Amish here, and I was going to say I may be dating myself here. I appreciate it when you're talking about people our age because I am 60 years old, and I appreciate that you're being generous and you're rounding up the different age categories. But I remember when the barcodes came out.
Oh, yeah.
And there are some Christians in churches who thought this was the mark of the beast, and this has to do with the end times, and they wanted nothing to do with it. And going back to your reference in the article, you said we don't think Christians can sit out AI unless we are going Amish. So, what do you say to Christians who want to completely avoid AI because they think it's evil?
I can respect the concern. I don't think AI in itself is evil because it's a tool. Now, people behind tools and people who are producing tools can desire them to use them for evil. But this is what I would say. Every technology that has come along has had people who were initial detractors from it and then eventually got on board because they realized the society has embraced these to the point where you can't operate in society without basically disconnecting from society. And so you think about like for a lot of people, you kind of reach an age where it's like I've quit assimilating new technology into my life, like, there was a point in time where my grandmother, she's gone to be with the Lord, but she never advanced to the internet age, like the TV and radio is about as far as she went. And then there are people who have been using the internet and email and social media, but they're not getting on board with AI. And I think part of that is an age thing. But part of it is because we're such on the front end of the AI revolution. We are on the tip of the spear of this thing. If this is a if this is 100% download bar, we're at the 2% mark. Like we're so at the beginning of this. I mean, where this ends up going is it goes into robotics. It goes into Like, you're gonna have households with robots that cook and clean for them, and it's not gonna be expensive to own. You think your Alexa is helpful or Siri is helpful, you've seen nothing. And this is true, but here's the thing, I mean, this is one of my co-founders was saying this. The problem with all of this, though, is who's controlling the ethics of these systems? Because the worst thing that you want is a robot in your house who is programmed to keep your house clean, and they are made and organized for efficiency. And Danny, what they end up deciding to do in order to best keep the house clean, they've gotta eliminate your family because you're the mess. You see what I'm saying? And that's not a far-fetched thing. Like, at the end of the day, we're talking about machines that are operating according to programming. And so, I guess I'm saying all this to say, every technology that's being made from this point on has AI built into it. So sitting it out, really, it's kind of impossible unless you truly just become Amish in terms of your adoption of technology. Your cars are gonna have AI. Everything will have AI.
Yeah. Well, let me get a little bit closer to my neighborhood. This is in your neighborhood too, and trying to avoid this stark division between the sacred and the secular. But I want to talk about the church in terms of some of the ethical implications for the use of AI in the church. And I would put it this way: I think Hollywood had kind of released some concerns, and maybe I don't know if they passed a law or regulation
Yeah.
saying that they're going to limit or not allow AI actors. This is kind of far fetched, I guess, but could there be
Well,
a
it's not that
danger
far
of
away.
okay. Well, could AI replace ministers? What are some of the ethical implications for AI in the church, Eric?
It's a good question. Here's what I would say. Can AI replace ministers? No. Will there be small fragments of churches and segments of churches and kind of movements that are going to probably push boundaries beyond the limits when it comes to that? You bet, because there always have been. But for the most part, here's what's gonna happen. As AI continues to advance, the yearning for and need for actual human touch and contact and relationship is going to be at a high value. And I believe going to church and interacting with people and hearing from my pastor, those are gonna be things that are irreplaceable. Now, I think Christians, including pastors and churches, are going to continue to find ways to use AI to enhance their productivity. I think ethically, no pastor should say, "Hey, AI, I'm preaching on John 1 this week. Write my sermon." Because it'll do that, but a pastor should not do that. A pastor should never forfeit or forego their own creative work, their own calling, and simply let AI do it. They should use AI as a tool to assist them and help them rather than to replace them in that work.
Yeah. Well, what about this one? I heard a friend of mine talking about submitting one of your own sermons that you have done, maybe an audio file or whatever, to AI, and then asking AI to come up with another one on another topic using your style and tendencies. Have you heard of that before? And what do you make
Sure.
of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's little fun things you can do with AI. I mean, you can prompt the AI you could say, "My favorite pastors are Adrian Rogers and Charles Spurgeon. Write me a sermon in the voice and style of Adrian and Charles." And it'll do that. It'll literally do that. Write me a sermon from a Presbyterian framework delivered to a rural congregation in East Tennessee, and it'll do that. You can prompt it in all kinds of ways. Now, in fun ways, you can be like, "Ooh, I wonder what that'd be like." Now, in
Right.
real ways, you could submit your sermon and say, "My congregation is a blue collar, rural congregation of 100 people that it ranges in age from 20 to 60. This is the makeup of my congregation. Here's my sermon that I've written this week. Can you help me think of any application I may be missing in light of my congregation? Can you help me to think through any words that may be confusing that I use in this sermon to my congregation that I don't explain well enough? And it will spit you back all kinds of really helpful insights based on your prompt. That's the thing that people need to realize is your AI is really only as good as the prompt you give it. And the way you prompt it will determine what it feeds you back.
Well, I can see its value as a research assistant.
Well, for sure.
Well, one of the things that comes to my mind on this whole AI thing, sadly, I would say, was related to Charlie Kirk's death. And I saw some videos about some AI generated videos with biblical characters. And then, Charlie's image was on there and they were playing it in some churches. I don't know how widespread this is. What are the pros and cons of doing things like that?
I don't like it. I don't think there's a lot of pros if I'm being honest. You can also create a Jesus chat bot. That
Yeah.
stuff exists out there, right? So it's like Jesus is talking to you. I just think those are unhelpful. These are ways that technology is quote unquote innovative and it's like, wow, we've never had anything like this before. But just because it is possible doesn't necessarily mean it's useful, right? And so here's the framework we talk about when it comes to thinking about AI. There's really three responses a Christian can have. You can reject it, which is what we talked about a while ago, right? You just become Amish, you don't involve yourself. You say, I'm scared of it, and it's
Yeah.
gonna be, it's bad. The second thing you can do kind of relates to what you just said, and I think that's receive it. So you just receive it uncritically. All these kinds of things you can do, you just go with because it's like, well, we can do it, so why shouldn't we do it? And I don't think that's wise. I think the third grid that we adopt and that we think is the way Christians ought to approach it is you redeem it. You redeem it under the authority of Christ and with wisdom. So I would not want to play a soundbite of Charlie Kirk saying, I'm in heaven and don't worry about me. I'm as good as ever. And it's just like, guys, that's not Charlie Kirk. That's not
Yeah.
Charlie Kirk. That is a machine.
Yeah.
And and so therefore it's not helpful. You're just receiving something this tool can do that is not beneficial. There's no benefit to the believer for this.
Just hearing you talk about that, and I kind of had the same vibe when I was watching and hearing it as well. But I was glad to hear you give a shout out to New Orleans Seminary a few minutes ago. That's kind of where I went.
I love Jamie
Well,
Dew.
yeah, I remember. I remember one of my theology professors back in the day making a comment. He said, "The greater the good, the greater the danger,"
Yeah.
and that has stayed with me all these years. And I think I'm hearing you say we have a responsibility. We've got this technology now. It's not going anywhere. I, I'm kind of with you on trying to find a way to use it redemptively
Yeah.
with our people.
So I think there's a couple of ways you can think about a couple of grids you can put it through. Something can be sinful or holy, and something can be wise or foolish. And I think those things are always to be thought about. Can I use AI in a way that's holy? Yes. Can I use AI in a way that's sinful? Yes. Can I use AI in a way that's wise? Yes. Can I use AI in a way that's foolish? Yes. They're not the same things because I may be able to use it in a way that's not sinful, but it is foolish. And so, like, for example, that's the category I would put, say, the fake audio of Charlie Kirk in. I think it's hard to say you sinned. I think it's easy to say that was foolish.
I just wonder how that comes across to people who actually knew him
I
or
know. I
our
know.
family members that are watching that. I've seen things like that with Martin Luther King and
Oh, yeah.
JFK and things of that nature.
And that's gonna be one of my biggest fears, Danny, about AI as things keep going forward, is right now you can kinda discern what is real and what is not when you see a picture or you see a video, but it's getting harder and harder.
Yeah,
And it's getting harder to know was that a real picture or was that an AI picture? Was that a
yeah,
real video I just watched? Was that really Danny in that video or was that AI? Because it's getting really close to a point where those things are gonna be harder to discern,
yeah.
and that can lead to all kinds
Well,
of problems.
I know, and I was reading an article in Christianity Today. Russell Moore wrote it. It's called "A New Era of AI is Here," and the church is not ready. And this is what he said. He said, people will be more honest. And I think you mentioned this earlier. People will be more honest with a chatbot than a human being. What do you make of that? And I'm wondering, is that more of an indictment on AI or on us?
Yeah, it's a good question.
I mean, I know that's good. We can make it an open question, but I
It's
had
a
not
good
thought of it
question.
from I had not thought of that before. If I'm talking to a device about my medical history, I can be fully completely honest with that device, but when it comes to talking about personal issues, it is easy to become more comfortable and depend upon this
Yeah.
artificial entity, and hey, I'm gonna be completely honest, and this response is gonna be completely, affirming and non-judgmental is where I'm going with this.
Well, it's easier to hide behind a screen, right? So the same is
Yeah.
true for social media, right? So people are more willing to fight on social media than they would ever do if they were in person with that individual, right? People say the nastiest things on social media that they would never say to that person's face. I think AI presents a similar challenge in that you are protected behind the keyboard and kind of because you're interacting with a machine and not a person. And so I do think the issue it's twofold. There's elements in which the machine and interacting with AI inherently creates this, just like social media inherently creates a disconnected engagement. But I do think it is the human. It's still a people problem that we won't open up and we want to stay isolated and hidden from people rather than being known.
Well, through the centuries, obviously, there have been a lot of technological advances. We probably don't even think about it, but when they came out at the time, people might have been spooked by it or had reservations about it. But you got print media and then radio and television and digital media, and they've all had a role in the spread of the gospel. But these technol
Vehicles,
Yeah,
airplanes.
yeah, and but connected in some capacity with something that is real or personal, and AI is different. So I guess I'm asking, as we're kind of poised to start another year together, and this is an open question too, is the AI world the next mission field? And if so, what does it look like, and how can we use it in a positive way?
That's a really good question. I mean, when you think about those technologies that you mentioned, that was when we were in the analog age, right? And now all of a sudden we're in the digital age. So the progress of technology shifted to a digital online age. It shrunk the world. You can now post this podcast and someone in India and someone in Australia, someone in Nigeria can all listen to it the moment you hit publish. That is the digital age that we live in now. And AI is just a part of that family. What I would say though is AI is bigger than any technology that we've ever seen. It is going to fundamentally change the world, the economy, the way society operates more than any other technology that's come along. And that would include the wheel, the car. It's going to change the world. And there's going to be lots of positive changes. That's scary for people to hear. But in the same way that everything else has changed the world and advanced the world, this will just become the next iteration of a world that has advanced because men and women have taken seriously, the call to cultivate the earth, and we're taking the resources we have and we're making them better and stronger and smarter. And there's a part of that that's good, and there is a common grace reality to that that's good. They're gonna be able to use AI calculations, Danny, to uncover the cure for Parkinson's disease, and they're gonna be able to figure out the genes and just go upstream to find the cure for Alzheimer's, and AI computations are gonna make all of that stuff possible, maybe within our lifetimes. Like, that's how incredible it could be. But to your point, like all things, we want them to honor Christ. We don't want them to be detached from the reality that Jesus is Lord. Jesus is Lord. He's the King of Kings. God, this is his world. It's his world. The triune God rules and reigns over this world. His son Jesus is its savior. And any AI that lives detached from that reality is just that, detached from reality. And so we don't want an evolutionistic AI. We want one that's grounded in principles. We want one that has ethics because we live in a world governed by a holy God. And I think it's going to be important for Christians as we move further and further into that world to hold those convictions in what we do. And that's why we started Dominion. Like, I mean, honestly, it's one of the reasons why we started Dominion was to say there's got to be an alternative to simply rolling with the secular engines. Christians need to have something they can count on and rely on.
Well, we're in a home stretch here. Are there any final thoughts about AI that you may want to mention or that I didn't cover? I mean, obviously, we're just scratching the surface. You said the tip of the spear. I think that's a good metaphor.
Yeah. I'm happy to share briefly if anybody wants to understand kind of how is ours Christian compared to another model.
Okay, let's go
So
with that.
yeah, so you have, in the world of LLMs, right? These large language models is what an LLM is. That's what the AI platforms are. The whole world of information is out there. Everything that's ever been published and that's out there to be consumed and grabbed is available to these engines, including Dominion's engine. Now, these agents, if you would, these agents within the system will take a question that you ask it, and it's going to go out into that big, vast universe of information, and it's going to go retrieve and collect and bring answers back to you based on your question, or it's going to do what you asked it to do. It's going to say, you're going to say, I need you to code me a program to help me solve this problem. And it will provide you literally software code, like, because all that stuff's available. And so it's able to do that kind of crazy thing. It'll build you a website if you want it to. Now, so there are some things that are not necessarily Christian in nature in terms of like, yeah, build a good website, right? But here's the thing. The AI, the agents are going to go retrieve this information. And in most models, they're just going to immediately give it to you. Now, here's the way our system and our platform is built. The agents are going to go retrieve that data, but our agents have been trained as Christian worldview agents. They have Christian training and fine tuning in terms of understanding what things are weighted and what matter to Christians, what Christian convictions hold, and it's not going to hold them all equal. Jesus being truly God and truly man, right? The second person of the Trinity weighs a little bit more than say your question about what are the signs of, or what's the 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ. Those are not equal in terms of their weight, but it's been trained. Now, here's what it's going to do though. Here's what our model is going to do. Before it's allowed to give you an answer, we have another agent that is called a judge. We have multiple judge agents. And here's what they do. They test that answer against the Christian worldview as well. So the agents are tuned, and then the judges are tuned to assess that and say, can we give this answer back to our user? And is it telling the truth? The reason that's such an important model is because you remember we talked about you can get the secular AIs to say whatever you want them to say to you as long as they get
Right.
a read of what you want. The issue is you can try to do that to our agents and you're going to be very unsuccessful, but you're going to be impossible to do it when our agents feed the judges the answer they plan to give and it doesn't hold its weight to a Christian worldview because our judge model is unable to be accessed by the user. You can't try to persuade
Uh,
our judge. Our judge never sees your question.
I'm
Our
glad you're
judge
talking about it. I'm glad you're talking about this because the phrase doctrinal accountability, I was curious about how that is implemented. And that's what you're saying. There is a judge that's not going to necessarily tell you what you want to hear.
the judge literally never even knows what the user is asking. All it's doing blindly is looking at the response that is being proposed and saying, does this check out from a Christian worldview? And it doesn't matter what the user prompted or what the user is trying to get it to say. It's purely looking at it objectively. Is this a Christian truth response? So you've got multiple things happening at the same time, all in milliseconds. You got these agents over here pulling and retrieving and providing answers. They are fine-tuned agents to the Christian worldview. And then you've got the judges who are the final arbiters on will we let the user receive this answer.
Well, let's kind of tie a bow on this, and let me ask you: if people want to know more about Dominion, or they want to know more about your work or your podcast, where do they need to go for that?
Yeah, so if they wanna learn more about Dominion, all they have to do is go to dominion.chat. So they go to dominion.chat, they'll be able to go to the website, they can read about the tool, and it talks a little bit about what I just described there, and then there is an ability to sign up from that tool or from that platform. For keeping up with me, a couple different things. I'm on Facebook, Instagram. I'm on Twitter. It's just Erik Reed, ERIKREED. And I'm on a podcast, a weekly podcast called the Bully Pulpit Podcast. And Bully Pulpit was a phrase that Theodore Roosevelt used, which he basically talked about his bully pulpit was his platform to influence. And so I am on the podcast with another pastor, an ethics professor, and a political operative who lives in DC. And we talk about news and politics from a Christian perspective every week. So we just look at all the things going on and we discuss the news from a Christian perspective. We talk about politics from a Christian perspective because that's an area where I think a lot of Christians they live in the world of politics and cultural issues and they don't always know how do we think Christian about these issues. And so that's what we do every week. We talk about that.
Well, this is neither here nor there, and I believe I've started following you all, and I'm not sure what episode it was. I'm gonna try to get you out of here in just a minute. But is there someone on the podcast that is a Chiefs fan that was
That's right.
lamenting?
That's our political operative, Eric teaching.
Okay, I'm just wanted to show my commiseration with this person because I lived in Missouri for 12 years,
Yeah, that's where he's from.
and I lived at well, Southwest Missouri, Springfield, and of course the Chiefs just got eliminated. So misery loves
I've been
company.
giving him a
Misery
really
loves
hard
company.
time. I've
Yeah,
been giving him a hard time. I told him after they lost a few games early in the year, I was like, buddy, this ain't the year. They're not going to do it. And he was like, this is what we always do. And I actually like Pat Mahomes. I think he's
yeah,
fantastic. But yeah, I've
yeah,
been giving him a hard time. It's been rough for him. It's been rough.
yeah. Well, listen, Eric, really and truly, I appreciate your time today, and I want to thank you for being on the podcast. I want to thank our listeners for being part of this conversation, and would encourage you to follow if you're not following already. Eric, the last thing I'd say, as I started off, Happy New Year,
Yeah, thank you. You too, bud.
and I want to thank our people for listening. And until next time, you take care.